You've been told to love yourself, to put on your own oxygen mask first. But what if loving yourself is just a way to avoid facing the darkness within? What if, in our quest for self-care and self-love, we're actually numbing ourselves from the pain that needs to be confronted? You might be thinking, but isn't self-care just about taking care of myself? And in many ways it is. However, when we use self-care as a constant distraction from our emotions, it can become a coping mechanism that's not addressing the root cause of our pain. Imagine you're trying to fix a leaky faucet with a Band-Aid. You might feel like you've temporarily patched things up, but ultimately the issue remains unresolved. Consider Sarah, who spends hours each day scrolling through social media, practicing yoga, and reading self-help books. On the surface, it seems like she's prioritizing her well-being. But when we dig deeper, we realize that she's avoiding conversations with her partner about their relationship issues. Her self-care routine has become a barrier to confronting the real problems. You might be doing something similar without even realizing it. You might be hiding behind your morning meditation or a relaxing bath to avoid dealing with the underlying emotions. It's essential to acknowledge this pattern in yourself and recognize that using self-care as a coping mechanism is not self-love, it's avoidance. So, let's get real for a moment. You've been treating yourself like royalty. You're always on the lookout for new wellness trends. You prioritize your self-care routine above all else, and you're constantly seeking personal growth. On the surface, it looks like you're taking care of yourself. But what if I told you that this excessive focus on self-care might be a sign of emotional neglect? Think about it. When was the last time you allowed yourself to feel uncomfortable or vulnerable without immediately reaching for a coping mechanism? When did you last experience a difficult emotion without labeling it as toxic or negative? You know, I've worked with clients who have built their entire identity around being a self-care expert. They're always talking about the latest essential oils and meditation techniques. But when we dig deeper, they reveal a deep-seated fear of feeling overwhelmed or powerless. That's not self-love, that's avoidance. As we explore these signs further, it's essential to remember that you're not alone in this struggle. Many people who have experienced childhood trauma turn to self-care as a way to cope with their emotions. But what if that coping mechanism is actually preventing you from confronting the real issue? When we experience childhood trauma, our brains are wired to respond in certain ways. We may have learned to people-please or seek constant validation from others as a way to avoid feelings of abandonment or rejection. On the surface, this might look like self-care. We're taking care of ourselves by seeking out comforting relationships and activities. But what if I told you that this is actually a coping mechanism? A way of avoiding the painful emotions associated with our childhood trauma. Let's say Sarah grew up in a chaotic household where her needs were constantly disregarded. As an adult, she throws herself into volunteering and helping others as a way to feel needed and loved. At first, it seems like self-care. She's taking care of others, feeling fulfilled. But what if I told you that she's actually using this as a distraction from her own emotional pain? She's avoiding the feelings of emptiness and rejection by constantly seeking external validation. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. We're temporarily numbing our emotions but ultimately perpetuating the problem. You see, people-pleasing is often a well-intentioned effort to avoid conflict or rejection. We think if we just do enough for others, they'll love us and accept us unconditionally. But the truth is, this constant seeking of validation can be like trying to hold water in our hands. No matter how hard we squeeze, it slips right through. We've all been there, feeling overwhelmed by life's demands, yet somehow managing to keep everything together. That's the hallmark of high-functioning depression. On the surface, we appear fine, even accomplished. But beneath the facade, a subtle erosion is taking place. We start to prioritize self-care as a way to cope with our emotions, rather than addressing the underlying issues. Imagine your emotional well-being as a garden. You water it daily, pruning away stress and anxiety, but neglecting the roots that need attention. The flowers bloom, but they're not sustainable without nourishment from within. We might get caught up in elaborate self-care routines, yoga classes, essential oils, or long baths, without ever stopping to question whether we're truly healing. Take Sarah, for instance, who started practicing meditation and journaling to cope with her anxiety. While these activities did bring her temporary relief, they also became a distraction from the deeper emotional pain she was trying to avoid. She began to believe that if she just practiced enough self-care, her emotions would magically resolve themselves. But they didn't. When self-care becomes a coping mechanism, we might feel like we're drowning in our own efforts to stay afloat. We think that if we just add one more face mask or one more yoga class, everything will be okay. But the truth is, self-care is not a band-aid for underlying issues. It's like trying to fill a bucket with holes in it. No matter how much water you pour in, it'll never truly hold. You might feel guilty when you're not practicing self-care, but what if instead of beating yourself up over it, you took that time and energy to address the root cause? Maybe that means having an honest conversation with a friend or family member about how they've been impacting your life. Or maybe it means seeking professional help from a therapist who can guide you through tough emotions. You are not lazy for needing more than just self-care. You're human, and humans need support to heal. Why no? Narration. We've been told that self-care is the answer to all our problems. Fill yourself up with bubble baths, journaling, and meditation, and you'll be fixed. But what happens when these rituals become more about avoiding pain than actually healing? This is where self-care addiction comes in. Think of it like a band-aid on a broken bone. You may cover the wound, but if you don't address the underlying injury, it's just going to keep festering. I've seen people who've spent years perfecting their morning routine, exercising and eating clean, only to find themselves stuck in a cycle of anxiety and self-doubt. Breaking free from self-care addiction requires more than just stopping the rituals. It demands seeking help, real help, not just online resources or books. A therapist can help you untangle your emotions, identify underlying issues, and work through them. And when I say work through them, I mean it in a very physical sense. It's like running a marathon. It hurts, but it's the only way to truly heal. Visual notes. A person trying to put on a band-aid on a deep gash. A person looking anxious and uncertain despite having a perfect morning routine. As we wrap up our exploration of the dark side of self-care, I want to leave you with a crucial question. Have you ever found yourself using self-care as a way to avoid dealing with your emotions? Maybe you've been treating yourself to a massage or a relaxing bath every time you feel anxious, but deep down, that anxiety is still there. You're putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. Think about it like this. When we use self-care solely as a coping mechanism, we might be momentarily numbing our pain, but we're not addressing the underlying issue. It's like having a perfect garden, but neglecting to water its roots. Eventually, the flowers will wilt, and you'll be left with nothing but dry soil. It's time to reevaluate your relationship with self-care. Instead of reaching for superficial solutions, let's work towards embracing our vulnerability. True self-care is about acknowledging our imperfections and being gentle with ourselves as we face them. As we close this conversation, I want you to remember that true healing isn't about perfecting self-care routines or achieving a state of constant calm. It's about acknowledging the darkness within and being brave enough to confront it head-on. You are not alone in your struggles with emotional neglect, childhood trauma, or toxic relationships. You have survived every difficult moment so far, and you can continue to do so. Break free from the shadow of self-care addiction and take a step towards seeking genuine support. You deserve to heal, and I'm here to remind you that you're not alone.